Have you ever noticed how some days you just feel full of energy and ready to take on the world, while other days your body just feels so ready to slow down and chill? If you have a menstrual cycle, that's completely normal.
So many of us grew up only knowing that we have a period and that we can get pregnant. But other than that, we haven't really learned about the flows of our body or our hormones or how our cycles actually work. We're taught that PMS and painful periods, cramping, and all of these different symptoms like anxiety and depression that we experience during our periods is just a normal part of having a menstrual cycle, but it's really not. I spent so many years as a young person struggling with heavy periods, with cramping, with bloating, with really my emotions having super extremes of anxiety and fatigue and all of these different things. And I thought that that was just normal and that I just had to deal with it. And it's just not true at all. These are actually all signs from our bodies that something is off, that something is out of balance. And so by learning how to work with the flow of our body and with these natural rhythms, we can actually bring the balance back into our body so that we don't have those extreme experiences. And in many cases, we can actually eliminate them completely. Wherever you are in your journey of reconnecting with your body, especially in the process of healing trauma, one of the most powerful things you can do is to learn about your cycle and bring a sense of balance and ease and support there first. I've found it just such a really good way to learn how to actually listen to our bodies so that we can start to learn what the messages and signals that our bodies are sending mean. And that then starts to support us in the other areas of our healing that we're moving through so that we can really learn how to listen to the way that our body speaks to us. When you build that foundational stability in your body, it will make it so much easier to be able to tell the difference between trauma patterns and health issues and just the need for some hormone balance and proper nutrients. So grab a journal, grab some tea, snuggle up in your little blanket cocoon and get comfortable. And let's dive into the sacred landscape together. This is part of my Menstrual Reclamation Series through the Cocoa Butter Therapy podcast. In today's videos of this menstrual series, we're going to talk about what cycle syncing is, how seed cycling works, and we're going to go over the 4 phases of your menstrual cycle and how to support and balance your hormones through each phase. So, a quick disclaimer, I just want to share that I'm not a doctor. I'm a Black, cis, multiracial mom of 3. I am an herbalist. I'm a farmer. I work a lot with plants. I'm a sound healer, a somatic coach. And so that's really my background. And in this series, I'm really speaking through my own experience. I'm not using gendered language here because this is for everyone who bleeds. But if what I'm sharing here doesn't vibe with you or it doesn't reflect your own experience, don't feel discouraged. There are so many resources out there, and my hope for you is to really be able to find the resources and the people in the community that feel the most aligned and supportive for your journey. So, with that being said, this isn't medical advice. You should always check with your doctor before incorporating new herbs or new routines to make sure that they're right for your body. So, what is cycle syncing? Cycle syncing is the practice of aligning your routines, everything from what you eat, your exercise, how you work, how you take care of yourself, and your time in community with all of the different phases that your body goes through throughout the month. So these phases are your follicular phase, ovulation phase, luteal phase, and menstrual phase, the one that we're probably most familiar with. Understanding these phases is really a game changer, especially if you're someone who is really impacted by major imbalances like fatigue, anxiety, depression, PMS, and mood swings throughout the month. It can also be really helpful for people who are dealing with PCOS, those who are wanting to try and conceive, and really just anyone who wants to have more balance in their lives. And also just a note, especially for people who are the supporters or caregivers or lovers of people who bleed. This information is just really important for everyone so that we can really support and take care of each other. What is seed cycling? Seed cycling is is a practice that comes from Ayurvedic medicine, and it's a really gentle, but I have found it to be a very effective approach to balancing hormones. For seed cycling, at each phase of your menstrual cycle, you eat different seeds to help to balance your hormones. So for your menstrual, follicular, and ovulation phase, you eat flax and pumpkin seeds, about 1 to 2 tablespoons. And then for your luteal phase, you eat sesame seeds and sunflower seeds, also 1 to 2 tablespoons. Flax seeds are really, really amazing and awesome. They help to keep your estrogen levels from going out of balance and from getting too high. They have a fiber in them called lignin, which is a phytoestrogen. And a phytoestrogen is basically a plant-derived version of estrogen, and estrogen is a hormone that is naturally produced in our bodies. So that phytoestrogen, the plant-derived estrogen that's found in flax seeds, helps our body to get rid of excess estrogen, which is really helpful because excess estrogen is one of those things that can cause a lot of anxiety and a lot of these different PMS symptoms and imbalances that we feel in our bodies. Both flax and pumpkin seeds also contain a lot of zinc in them, which is really important. Zinc helps our bodies to produce progesterone, and progesterone is really something that you want to have in the second phase of your cycle. So it's really important to receive that from seeds. And they also contain omega-3 fatty acids, which is really important because omega-3s help to reduce inflammation in the body, and inflammation is really the cause of most health issues and most of these things that we're experiencing in our body. So omega-3s are really huge for regulating hormones. Flax seeds are also great because they help to lengthen the luteal phase, which can be really supportive for people who are trying to conceive, but also people who are wanting to balance some of these highs and lows with PMS symptoms. And then for the luteal phase, like I was saying before, you want to eat 1 to 2 tablespoons of sunflower seeds and sesame seeds each day. Sesame seeds also have high lignans, which help to balance estrogen and prevent it from going too high. And then sunflower seeds have high levels of selenium in them, which is really good because selenium is really supportive for the liver. And the liver really helps to flush excess hormones out of our body. So having that selenium to help aid the liver in its job is really supportive during this part of our cycle. And both of these seeds also have omega-6s in them, which really help our bodies to produce progesterone. Just a heads up, this is really important. And as you get to know me, you'll hear that I talk about this probably all the time. But when you are working with nuts and seeds, you want to make sure that you soak them first, or that they have already been soaked or sprouted before you eat them. Nuts and seeds contain anti-nutrients around them that are coating them, which are actually toxic for humans. And so when we eat nuts and seeds that haven't been pre-soaked or sprouted or cooked, they can really, really mess up our digestive system. So just make sure that they are soaked or sprouted prior to eating. You can buy packages of seeds that will say sprouted on them, or cooked or soaked ahead of time, if you don't want to have to do that yourself. I'll definitely dive into nutrient density and ancestral ways of preparing food in a future video. It's something I'm super passionate about and love talking about. But for now, just make sure that you have your seeds soaked, baked, or sprouted before using them. It usually takes a few months to really start to see and experience the benefits of seed cycling. And it's also important to note that if you're on birth control, or if you're on other synthetic hormones, or if you have really, really, really high stress, you might not notice a huge difference right away, and you might need some other supports to really help you to experience the benefits of seed cycling. Seed cycling is really a part of the bigger journey of reconnecting with our bodies and with the land. And that's really where we see a lot of the transformations happening in our bodies. phase. And now we're going to get into the 4 phases of your cycle, where we'll talk a little bit more about what these hormones are, how they work, and how they impact your body, and what we can do to bring balance to our cycle and the flow. So, we're going to dive into the menstrual phase first, the one that we're most familiar with. This is the time of the month where many of us are bleeding. In traditional Chinese medicine, the menstrual phase is considered your inner winter. It's really a time for rest and reflection, for moving slowly, going inward. Your menstrual phase is also represented as the new moon. And during your menstrual phase, what's happening is that your body's beginning to shed the uterine lining, which is the inner layer of tissue that lines your uterus. And one of the primary roles of the uterine lining is that it's what nourishes and supports a growing embryo if fertilization and implantation has occurred. But if it hasn't occurred, that lining starts to shed because the egg wasn't fertilized. And as a result, our estrogen and our progesterone levels, which are 2 hormones in our body, start to drop, which means that our bodies are really in a state of needing deep rest, cozy spaces, and really just zero obligations and just the ability to care for our bodies and be cared for, which can make the way that the world is set up really, really hard because it really is in opposition to what our bodies need during our menstrual phase. So during your menstrual phase, your body loses about 25 to 80 milliliters of blood. So your body is really releasing a lot and it's working really hard. And that's why resting and nourishing foods to really build up that nourishment are so important. And so during this phase of your cycle, if you're experiencing cramps or other symptoms like nausea, fatigue, things like that, that is definitely a sign that you may be experiencing hormonal imbalance and also inflammation. So during the menstrual phase, some of the most important nutrients that we want to focus on are magnesium. Magnesium is found in things like cacao and leafy greens and magnesium baths. And magnesium is what really helps us with cramping and bloating. So we really want to get that magnesium in our bodies. And that's why a lot of times we see that kind of like stereotype of eating chocolate on your period, because chocolate contains magnesium. But to really get the benefits of magnesium, you want to have like raw or even ceremonial grade cacao, because that's what's going to have the high calcium and magnesium content in it. We also want to focus on zinc. Zinc is another one that we talked about before that's really helpful for reducing inflammation, which will also in turn help to reduce cramping. And so some of the places that we can get zinc are foods like oysters and beans and nuts. We also want to focus on antioxidants. Antioxidants also help us combat inflammation, and some of the foods that we find a lot of antioxidants in are berries, turmeric, and also green tea. And iron, this is super essential. I think lots of people know about iron. That's why we kind of like start sometimes craving red meat or things like that. Iron is super essential during this phase, especially for people who tend to have really heavy periods. So you can find iron in things like grass-fed beef and nettles and lentils. Complex carbs are another one that we want to focus on. And so complex carbs really help us to stabilize our blood sugar levels, which helps us to avoid those really dramatic crashes and mood swings. With complex carbs, we want to focus on things like root vegetables. Sweet potatoes are a really good place to get complex carbs, brown rice, and things like that. And healthy fats. Healthy fats are super, super crucial. Healthy fats help us to build up hormones like estrogen and progesterone. So we want to incorporate cold pressed oils like olive oil, unrefined coconut oil, cold pressed avocado oil, and fatty fish is also another great place to get healthy fats. And we really, during this phase, want to avoid refined sugar, fried foods, caffeine, and alcohol. Those things can all make a lot of these symptoms a lot worse and they increase inflammation. Physical activity, I think this is probably the most underrated but important for us to think about because a lot of the exercise routines and things that we have learned about have been designed for men or people who don't bleed's bodies. And that's really not how our bodies work. This is a time where we really need rest. So you don't want to be doing high intensity workouts or things like that. You really want to focus on things like yin yoga, really restorative, relaxing practices that are nourishing for the body. Self massage, acupressure are really good. There are so many really amazing yin yoga videos on YouTube. Move with Shanika has a really nice menstrual phase yin yoga practice that I love. I'll link it in the description. And then QiYogaWithLuChin, also she has a really great reflexology for menstrual cramps video that I found really helpful. I'll link that also below. And really just starting to incorporate different rituals and practices that help your body to really feel loved and honored and supported during this phase, I have felt to be so, so helpful. And Saka Essentials recently put out a video called Ancestral Beauty Rituals. And I really love that video because the rituals that she was sharing were very, very simple and very earth and ancestral based and really beautiful. So I'll share that link. I think that that video is super inspirational and just really gives you a sense of how you can incorporate rituals that are really intuitive and simple, but really have such a profound impact on your body. Next is the follicular phase. It happens right after your period and it lasts about 7 to 10 days. In Chinese medicine, it corresponds with your inner spring. So, this is a time of awakening, of life, of renewal, and it's linked to the liver and the gallbladder. The follicular phase represents the waxing moon, and this is the phase that's really linked to egg health and fertility health, even though it's really often overlooked. So, what's happening during the follicular phase is after your body has shed the uterine lining, your body starts to produce follicular stimulating hormone, also known as FSH, which stimulates the growth of several follicles. So, the follicles are these fluid filled sacs that are found in the ovaries that contain immature eggs. So, those two little white bulbs on the end of the ovaries, that is where the fluid filled sacs are. So, during this phase, the hormone estrogen is released by the growing follicle to start to rebuild the uterine lining in preparation for pregnancy. And then once the follicle grows, estrogen begins to spike, which then signals the release of luteinizing hormone, also known as LH, which is what triggers ovulation. So, excess estrogen can lead to hormonal imbalance. It's kind of like one of the main things that can cause all of those really uncomfortable mood swings and imbalances and physical imbalances in our bodies. And it can also lead to conditions like PCOS, which can cause symptoms like really heavy periods and PMS symptoms. So, detoxifying the excess estrogen becomes really, really important, especially during this phase. This is also a really important point for people who are premenopausal because the fluctuating estrogen levels can lead to a lot of mood swings and hormonal imbalances, headaches and sleep issues, and other things like that. So, during your follicular phase, when we look at diet, the thing that we're really focusing on here is detoxing excess estrogen. So, we want to focus on sprouted foods, so soaking seeds, nuts, grains, and legumes, things like beans. As we were talking about earlier, all of these contain phytic acid, which is an anti-nutrient that coats the seed and is really toxic for our bodies. Our bodies can't digest that, so you really want to be soaking these before eating to make them more digestible. And there's many different grains and nuts and seeds you can sprout. Some of them that are really helpful for detoxing excess estrogen are things like sunflower sunflower seeds, chickpeas, lentils, quinoa, almonds, and also cashews. We want to bring in a lot more fermented foods here. Fermented foods are really rich in probiotics. And probiotics are really awesome because they really help to balance our gut health and detoxify hormones. Some of the sources that I really love are kombucha and kimchi, sauerkraut, yogurt, and kefir. And we also want to focus on prebiotics. So, prebiotics are actually the food that probiotics and healthy bacteria eat. So, prebiotics really feed the healthy bacteria in our gut. So, some of the really prebiotic rich foods include burdock root, which is one of my favorite. It has a lot of inulin, which is really good for your gut. Apples, avocados, bananas, garlic, onions, and whole grains like brown rice. Those are all really good ways to get prebiotics in. And another herbal ally that I really love to work with during this phase is dandelion root. Dandelion root is a diuretic, which means that it helps to flush out toxins, helps you to move liquids and fluids and pee. It also helps the production of bile in your liver. It helps your liver to start to detox hormones and some of the toxins that can build up in our livers. So during the follicular phase, we're kind of coming out of that really restful hibernating space. We're starting to slowly and gently increase our energy a little bit. This is a really good time of the month to start to set intentions and do intention setting rituals. It's a good time to plan or really come up with your goals for the month. And it can also be a really good time to start new things like new projects. You can start to incorporate some more active, energetic practices. So things like coming back to walking and hiking, flow based yoga. So, yeah, that's the follicular phase. And now we move into the ovulation phase. In Chinese medicine, the ovulation phase represents our internal summer, the element of fire. It represents the full moon. And, traditionally, before we had all of these interruptions to our circadian rhythm of blue lights and smartphones and electricity and all of these things, many people's cycles would have the flow of kind of like we bleed on the new moon and we are ovulating on the full moon. I have done a lot of work to actually bring my cycle back into that balance because it was off because of all of these different movements, being up late, all of this stuff. It is possible to switch your cycle back that way. Sometimes it's not possible for everyone, but if that's something you're interested in, we'll talk about that a bit in future videos. So the ovulation phase lasts about 3 to 4 days, and it usually occurs about 14 to 21 days after your period, though high stress can definitely impact that timing. During this phase, there's a brief spike in LH and FSH hormones, which signals to our body that ovulation is about to happen. This is the phase where the follicle has reached maturity, and so because of that, it bursts open to release the egg into the fallopian tube. Some people can experience some pain during ovulation, and after the egg is released, it can survive for about 12 to 24 hours. But the fertile window can actually start 5 days before ovulation, and sperm can survive in the reproductive tract during that time. So that's really important to be aware of if you're trying to get pregnant or also if you're trying to avoid getting pregnant. So this is when the egg is released, and when this is happening, people can sometimes feel like a boost of energy and creativity. You can have like a stronger libido and pull to intimacy with yourself or with others. And sometimes people can start to experience kind of like this general love of life. It can feel like kind of like a slight rosy colored glasses type of vibe, a little bit different than the sensations you might have been feeling before. During this phase, there's also an increase in cervical fluid. In our future videos, we're going to go more into the different textures and kinds of cervical fluid so that when you start tracking tracking and learning more about your body, you can have more of an exploration about what those fluids mean for you. But during this phase, there's usually that clear egg white slimy fluid. And during this phase, if the egg isn't fertilized, then the body starts to begin the process of preparing to shed the uterine lining, which leads us into the luteal phase. So some of the foods that we focus on during the ovulation phase are things like vitamin C, along with fiber. Fiber helps our body produce glutathione, which is an antioxidant that supports the liver in detoxing excess estrogen and preventing the buildup of excess estrogen, which can lead to a lot of PMS symptoms later on. So in each of these phases, we're really eating food to support the next phase. So it's really important to think about that when you're eating and caring for yourself. What you're doing in the previous phase is really setting the stage for the next phase that you're going into. So brassica family vegetables are also really important during the ovulation phase. So things like broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, kale, mustard greens, collards, bok choy. They all have anti-cancer properties, and eating them during your ovulation phase really helps your liver with the detoxification process. So when these types of vegetables are metabolized, they release a compound that's called indole 3 carbinol, which can increase estrogen breakdown in the liver by 50%, which is also great for people who are premenopausal because having that support with breaking down excess estrogen is really important. And lastly, we transition into the luteal phase. So the luteal phase in Chinese medicine is considered your inner autumn. The luteal phase begins right after ovulation. It lasts about 2 weeks, and it's the phase that's right before your period. It ends the day of your first period. This is really the phase of preparation. I feel this phase the most in my body, and I notice that it's the time where I really have to focus on nutrition and caring for my body, and that it has such a big impact on how I experience my menstrual phase based on what I do in the luteal phase. So what happens after ovulation is that the empty follicle that just released the egg transforms into what is called the corpus luteum. And what the corpus luteum is that it's a temporary hormone secreting gland which produces progesterone to help to thicken the uterine lining. And this also slightly raises your body temperature. And the purpose of that is to basically create the perfect environment for a pregnancy to take place. But if there's no fertilization, then the corpus luteum dissolves, your progesterone drops, and then that hormonal shift is what triggers your next cycle of bleeding. And so that drop in progesterone is often what is causing those PMS symptoms that we're really familiar with: the fatigue, the bloating, the mood changes, all of the cravings. And while PMS is very familiar and common to many people, it's actually really not normal. It's really our body trying to tell us that something is off. And so a lot of the symptoms that we experience through PMS is also heavily induced by our culture of our bodies being forced to go and move and operate in this way that is very much out of alignment with the natural ebbs and flows of our cycle and the process that our body is really going through. So when we're really able to slow down before we bleed in the luteal phase, it really helps how we experience the menstrual phase and a lot of these symptoms. And I know it's really hard to find ways to slow down, but and for me, I've really designed my entire life around being able to honor the natural rhythms of my body as much as I can. Of course, there's a lot of things that you can't control or change, but the more that we bring these practices in and being really intentional about our energy and aligning our ways of being in the world as much as we can with the phase our body's in, it really has a profound impact on our cycle and how we experience it. So this phase is really about tuning into our body, starting to listen and notice what's arising, noticing how the energy in our body is naturally dipping during this phase. And this is a really powerful time for reflection and for starting to get your space really comfy, cozy, and ready for you to go into that internal winter. So, this is a good time to also tie up loose ends in work or in other areas of your life so that you can really, as much as you can, drop into the menstrual phase and be able to be as present with your body and your needs as possible. So, some of the nutrients that we focus on during the luteal phase are complex carbs and soluble fiber like oats and quinoa and apples and sweet potatoes, which help to regulate your blood sugar levels and your mood. We want to focus on vitamin B6 from foods like avocado, spinach, bananas, and salmon. These help your body produce progesterone, and they also are really supportive for PMS symptoms. We want to focus on magnesium and calcium. So, foods like cacao, beans, tofu really helps to ease cramps and bloating and irritability. And other forms of soluble fiber that we want to invite in are things like berries, flax seeds, leafy greens, which really support that healthy elimination of excess estrogen. This is a time where we start to slow our movement down as we prepare to go into the menstrual phase. So things like restorative yoga, gentle stretching, walking. It's good to avoid high intensity cardio or exercising during this phase and really prioritizing rest, really grounding meals, and space to turn inward. So you probably are noticing by now that our bodies are doing so much work throughout the whole month. And it's something that our culture just doesn't acknowledge and just kind of like pretends that it doesn't even exist. But really, this is a lot of work that our bodies are doing all of the time. And especially once we start bleeding, that's a lot of labor for our body to be doing. And so it's not really natural for our bodies to be in this state of like high intensity, consistent workload of putting out all this energy all of the time. And once you start to really understand and honor what your body is really doing, it can really help you to feel better about slowing down and about working with these flows and cycles and the way that your body is. When we are able to support our body's rhythms, we can really significantly reduce a lot of pain, a lot of fatigue, and a lot of the imbalances that we experience in our bodies. So, honoring your cycle is really the foundation in many ways of your health and of your health journey. Our bodies really need to be supported and cared for and not forced into really unnatural ways of moving and being in the world. So, taking lots of time for rest and nourishment, especially in that phase, can really support your body. So, in the next video of the Menstrual Reclamation Series, we're going to go deeper into the menstrual phase. I'm going to share some of the recipes that I use during that phase, some of the herbal infusions, the rituals, the practices, the tools that I use to track, and all of these kinds of things. And we're really just going to be spending time exploring our bodies and learning about what our bodies need to be well. So I hope this video was supportive to you on your journey, and please like and subscribe to the channel. Share your comments below. I would love to hear about what your process has been with your cycle and what you're exploring and learning about your body. Please share this video with your friends, with your family, with your teenagers. I really want to make this information accessible so that more people can have access to it and that we can really have more agency to reclaim the ancestral practices and wisdom of our bodies. So I hope y'all take great care wherever you are in your cycle. I hope that you're able to find lots of space for nourishment, and I'll see you next week for our exploration of the menstrual phase. Bye, loves.